Picture this. Hollywood, 1988. The golden age of action cinema. Two legends standing in the same room, one basking in the spotlight, the other content in the shadows. Jean-Claude Van Damme, fresh off his breakout role in Bloodsport, muscles gleaming, ego soaring higher than his famous helicopter kick. Across the room stands Chuck Norris, older, quieter, a man who'd already proven everything he needed to prove. What happened next would become Hollywood legend, though not the kind Van Damme ever wanted to be part of. Because on that night, in front of producers, stuntmen, and industry elites, Van Damme made a choice. He laughed. Not with Chuck, but at him. He mocked the man who'd paved the way for action stars like himself. And Karma? Karma was watching. Karma was taking notes. And Karma never forgets. Let's rewind to understand how we got here. Jean-Claude Van Damme arrived in Hollywood with nothing but a dream, a gym bag, and a flexibility that defied human anatomy. He slept in his car. He took whatever work he could get. He was hungry, not just for success, but for recognition, for validation, for the world to see him as the action hero. When Bloodsport exploded onto screens, that hunger was finally fed. Magazine covers, interviews, fans screaming his name. At 37 years old, Van Damme felt invincible. Chuck Norris, meanwhile, had already walked the path Van Damme was just beginning. He'd starred in Way of the Dragon alongside Bruce Lee. He'd created the Missing in Action franchise. He'd earned his black belt legitimately, competed in real tournaments, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. At 48, Chuck wasn't chasing fame anymore. He was focused on family, on teaching, on giving back to the martial arts community that had given him so much. Different men, different stages, different philosophies. The stage was set for collision. The party was at a producer's mansion in the Hollywood Hills. Champagne flowing, deals being made, egos inflating like balloons. Van Damme arrived like a peacock. Tight shirt, designer jeans, that signature smile that said, "I've made it and I know it." He worked the room, shaking hands, flexing for photos, soaking in every drop of attention. Then someone mentioned Chuck Norris had just arrived. Van Damme's expression shifted, just slightly. "Chuck's here?" he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "The old cowboy still shows up to these things?" There was laughter, nervous laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Chuck entered quietly, dressed simply, no entourage, no fanfare. He greeted people with genuine warmth, asked about their families, listened more than he spoke. This was who Chuck had always been, humble to his core, secure enough not to need the spotlight. But to Van Damme in that moment, Chuck's humility looked like weakness. His quiet confidence looked like irrelevance. And the young lion decided the old lion needed to be reminded that his time had passed. It started with whispers. Van Damme, surrounded by younger actors and stuntmen, began telling stories. "You know Chuck's last movie barely made back its budget?" he said, grinning. "The guy moves like he's got arthritis." Those roundhouse kicks. More like roundhouse yawns. More laughter. Louder this time. Someone tried to interject, "Hey man, Chuck's a legend." But Van Damme waved them off. "Legends are for museums. This is Hollywood. You're only as good as your last movie." He raised his glass in Chuck's direction across the room, a theatrical toast dripping with mockery. "To the pioneers who made way for the real action stars." The room went quiet, that uncomfortable silence when everyone knows a line has been crossed, but nobody wants to be the one to call it out. Chuck, standing near the bar, heard every word. He turned, made eye contact with Van Damme, and something flickered across his face. Not anger, not embarrassment, but something deeper. Disappointment. The look a teacher gives a student who should know better. Chuck didn't respond. He simply nodded once, set down his drink, and left the party. No scene, no confrontation, just quiet dignity walking out the door. Van Damme watched him leave and laughed again, this time louder, playing to his audience. "See? He's got nothing, nothing to say, nothing to prove." He felt powerful in that moment, victorious, like he'd just won some unspoken battle. He had no idea he'd just lit a fuse that would burn slowly, inevitably, toward his own undoing. That night, Chuck drove home in silence. His wife noticed immediately. "What happened?" she asked. Chuck shook his head. "Pride," he said simply. "I saw pride that hasn't been tested yet." But here's what Van Damme didn't know. Couldn't know because he'd never bothered to look beyond the surface. Chuck Norris wasn't just an action star. He was a six-time undefeated world middleweight karate champion. He'd trained special forces. He'd created his own martial arts system, Do, focused on discipline and respect above all else. And more importantly, Chuck had been where Van Damme was now. Young, hungry, thinking the world owed him something. Bruce Lee had taught Chuck a lesson years ago during the filming of Way of the Dragon. Bruce had beaten him in their fight scene. Sure, but afterward, Bruce pulled him aside. "You're good," Bruce told him, "but good fighters respect all fighters, especially the ones who came before. The moment you forget that, you've already lost." Chuck had never forgotten, and now watching a younger version of his former self make the same mistakes, Chuck made a decision, not to retaliate, not to humiliate, but to teach. 3 weeks later, a major studio was casting for a new action film, a franchise launcher with a massive budget. Both Van Damme and Chuck were on the short list. The final decision would come down to a screen test, a choreographed fight sequence to demonstrate their skills, stamina, and screen presence. Van Damme prepared like he always did. Flashy spinning kicks, dramatic splits, sequences designed to make audiences gasp. He was ready to show Hollywood once and for all who the real action king was. Chuck prepared differently. He trained with his old students, focusing not on spectacle but on precision, economy of movement, real martial arts, not movie martial arts. He trained like he was 25 again, pushing his body, remembering what it felt like to compete when every match mattered. The screen test day arrived. Van Damme went first and he was spectacular. Backflips, aerial kicks, that signature splits punch that had become his calling card. The producers applauded. Van Damme bowed, soaking it in, already imagining his name above the title. Then Chuck stepped up, and something happened that nobody expected. He moved like time had reversed, fast, fluid, powerful, but more than that, authentic. Every technique was real. Every strike had the weight of 30 years of discipline behind it. He didn't perform for the camera. He let the camera witness what he'd always been. The stunt coordinator, a former tournament fighter himself, actually stood up mid-sequence, eyes wide. When Chuck finished, the room was silent. Then one person started clapping, then another, then everyone. Chuck got the role, not just for that film, but for the entire trilogy. The movies became massive hits, reigniting his career and introducing him to a whole new generation. Van Damme? He still got work, still made movies, but something had shifted. The industry remembered what happened. More importantly, Van Damme remembered. Months later, at another industry event, Van Damme saw Chuck across the room. This time, there was no entourage around Van Damme, no audience to perform for. He was just a man who'd learned a hard lesson about respect. He walked over. Chuck turned, and for a moment, Van Damme saw that same look from the party. Not judgment, but something gentler. Understanding. "I was out of line," Van Damme said quietly. "What I said, how I acted, I'm sorry." Chuck studied him for a moment and then extended his hand. "We all have moments we're not proud of," he said. "What matters is what we learn from them." They shook hands, and in that moment, Van Damme felt something he hadn't felt in years, not like a star, but like a student. And maybe for the first time, like a martial artist worthy of the title. Here's the thing about legends. Real legends don't have to announce themselves. They don't have to tear others down to lift themselves up. Real strength doesn't shout. It speaks in actions, in consistency, in the way you treat people when you've got nothing to gain from being kind. Van Damme learned that ego is like armor made of glass. It might look impressive, but the moment it's tested, it shatters. Chuck Norris taught him that true power comes not from proving you're better than everyone else, but from being secure enough not to need to prove anything at all. In Hollywood, they still tell this story, not as gossip, but as a reminder. A reminder that respect isn't given to the loudest person in the room. It's earned by the person who honors those who came before, who lifts others up, who remembers that every champion was once an underdog. Van Damme got his movies, he got his fame. But on that night when he laughed at Chuck Norris, he paid a price that no amount of box office success could cover. He learned that mocking a legend doesn't make you legendary. It just makes you the punchline of your own story.